Fraction simply means numbers that we use to express parts of a whole. Fractions are expressed like this: parts out of a whole. The parts that stay up, we call this the numerator. And the parts that stay down, this one, we call it the denominator. And this line you see that divides the parts and the whole is the same division that you use in mathematics. But because it is fraction, we refer to this line here as all over, or you can say divide by. Whichever one you call it, you are correct. I'm going to introduce you to 10 different types of fractions. The first one I'm going to talk to you about is the one we refer to as the proper fraction. An example of a proper fraction is 1 all over 2, 2 all over 3, etc. It continues like that. The most important thing is that the number that is the numerator is small, while the denominator is large. When you see that kind of fraction, we simply call it a proper fraction. Improper fractions are fractions that deal with larger numerator and smaller denominator. The numerator is large, the denominator is small. So it's larger numerator all over small denominator. I'm just going to write it as DON. An example of this is 3 divided by 2, or 3 over 2, 4 over 3. The most important thing you need to know is that when we talk about improper fractions, they deal with larger numerator and smaller denominator. The third part of fraction I want to introduce you to, we call this one the mixed fraction. Mixed fraction is a kind of fraction that has a whole number with it. So usually we have a whole number standing on its own like this, and then a proper fraction is close to it. So an addition of the whole number and the proper fraction is what gives us the mixed fraction. Usually we write it as this form: whole number, which I'm going to represent here as W, and then a smaller numerator, I'm going to write it like this as small num, all over larger denominator, large denominator. Let me write it this way. An example of a mixed fraction is 1 whole number 1 over 2. You can see the 1 whole number written so big, and then a proper fraction is close to it. It can come in other forms: 3 whole number 1 over 3, 4 whole number 5 over 6, and it continues that way. Whenever you see fractions of this nature, we refer to it as the mixed fraction. Now, when we say a fraction and another fraction are like fractions, they are 2 or more fractions with the same denominator. Take, for example, fractions like 2 over 4, 5 over 4 at the same time, 6 over 4 at the same time, 7 over 4 at the same time. Notice something very common with this. All their denominators are the same. They have 4 as the denominator. That is what makes them like fraction. It's as simple as that. It can be proper fraction or improper fraction. The most important thing is that the denominators are the same. The fifth kind of fraction I'm going to tell you is the opposite of the like fraction. So the opposite of like is unlike. The unlike type of fraction is this kind of fraction whose denominators are not the same. You have situations like 2 over 3, 3 over 4, 5 over 6, 7 over 8, and the process just continues. It doesn't end. But the most important thing is that all their denominators are not the same, and because of that we call them unlike fractions. The next one is the equivalent fraction. The equivalent fraction is just the same fraction written in different ways. Yeah, they are formed by multiplying or dividing the numerator and their denominator by the same number. Let me give you some examples. See, 1 over 2, I can actually write this 1 over 2 as 2 over 4. You will notice that I just multiplied both the numerator and the denominator by the same number. 1 times 2, 2. 2 times 2, 4. I multiplied by 2. It can also be written as 3 upon 6, 4 upon 8, 5 upon 10, 6 upon 12, and the numbers continue. See, 2 times 2, 4, 2 times 1, 2, 2 times 3, 6, 1 times 3, 3, 2 times 4, 8, 1 times 4, 4, 2 times 5, 10, 1 times 5, 5, 2 times 6, 12, 1 times 6, 6. I keep multiplying both the numerator and the denominator by exactly the same number. And that's what makes them equivalent. So the fractions are actually the same thing, but we've written them in different ways. Unit fractions. A unit fraction is a fraction whose numerator is equal to 1. No matter the denominator, the most important thing is that the numerator is 1. 1 over 2 is an example. 1 over 3 is an example. 1 over 4 is an example. 1 over 100 is an example. 1 over 300 is an example. It continues. Just notice here that the numerator of these fractions remains 1. The opposite is non-unit fraction. A non-unit fraction is that kind of fraction whose numerator is never 1. The denominator can be anything, but the numerator will never be 1. So you can imagine fractions like 2 over 3, 4 over 5, 6 over 7, 8 over 9. The numbers continue. The most important thing is that the numerator will never be number 1. That is what differentiates it from the other kind of fraction. Let me tell you about a kind of fraction we call the decimal fraction. A decimal fraction is a fraction whose denominator is expressed as a power of 10. What this means is that the denominator of the fraction can either be 10 or 100 or 1000 or 10,000 or 100,000. It continues that way. The most important thing is that the denominator is the power of 10. Now the numerator can take any shape. I can decide to give them 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It doesn't matter. But the most important thing is that the denominators of these fractions are expressed in the powers of 10. And that is why we refer to them as decimal fraction. And the 10th kind of fraction, which is our jth number, is the kind of fraction we refer to as the whole fraction. Now, a whole fraction is that kind of fraction that is exactly the same thing as 1. The numerator is equal to the denominator for this kind of fraction. The numerator is equal to the denominator. It's always like that. Let me give you an example. 8 over 8, for instance. This is a whole fraction. 9 over 9 is a whole fraction. 1 over 1, it's a whole fraction. You will notice that if I decide to simplify all these fractions, remembering the fact that this line here is the division line, all the fractions so far will give me 1 as my number. See, 8 divided by 8, for example, is 1. 9 divided by 9 is 1. 1 divided by 1 is 1. So a whole fraction is a fraction that is equal to 1. When you see a numerator and a denominator exactly the same thing, you know that this is a whole fraction. So far in this video, we have been able to identify the different kinds of fractions that we use on a daily basis. But just have this in mind. Know the different kind of fractions and see if you can apply them in solving problems. Thanks for watching.